After the last two failures of the X-Men film series, everyone thought the franchise was definitely dead, gone the way of Spider-Man and the Blade film series with no hopeful future in sight. Then a director by the name of Matthew Vaughn and a group of Fox execs came through and said, well, let's just reboot it. So, yeah, I guess it pretty much went exactly the way of Blade and Spider-Man. Giving them some credit though, they did reboot it softly since they figured audience members didn't want anything too hard shoved in their faces. You know, they figured audiences wanted something familiar, but also something fresh to work on so it'd eventually grow into something bigger and more pleasing.
What kind of movies are we reviewing here?
That's right, X-Men First Class, Fox's total stab in the dark to get the X-Men franchise back on track. We have new comic-accurate suits, a young new cast, and a young Jennifer Lawrence who's actually trying. What more could you ask for? All jokes aside, Mr. Vaughn and company probably brought us one of the best X-Men films to date, if not one of the best comic book movies. It's always going to be overshadowed by movies like Logan, The Dark Knight, Joker, etc. And don't get me wrong, those movies are objectively better. But amongst the roaring madness of the MCU and the failing subsequent X-Men films, this movie definitely gets a bit buried. X-Men First Class has two great main characters, Charles Xavier and Erik Lehnsherr, played magnificently by James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender respectively. Now, Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart are definitely tough acts to follow, but these two definitely brought their A-game, especially Fassbender's Magneto. I mean, this dude made French sound intimidating. French!
Je vous retrouverai.
And you can tell the writers really cared about their growth and journey as characters because these characters are each handled with care. Their lives and experiences are very different, and though they find themselves on the same road and have similarities, their goals are very different, and you can see that in each decision these characters make that leads up to their inevitable split at the end. The movie also does very good with Raven and Hank. Now, they aren't necessarily comic accurate, but I don't believe that takes away from their development in this movie as two youths struggling with who they really are. In fact, most of the relationships and interactions are really good. The young adults feel like young adults, and it's super fun to watch them bounce off one another and interact. There are, however, a few issues with the movie. The movie opens up with a look at a young Erik Lehnsherr and a young Charles Xavier. The scene at the beginning of the first X-Men movie is recreated with Erik bending the metal fence in an attempt to get back to his family. It's almost a shot-for-shot remake, but there are a few close-ups added in. Unfortunately, the close-ups kind of take away from the scene. It really breaks the flow and dulls the tension. You can tell some of these were added in after the fact, the lighting doesn't quite seem consistent, and the reaction shots don't seem to match the intensity of what's going on.
You'd be surprised how you look.
Erik's scene is juxtaposed with the scene of a young Charles taking in a young Raven. The acting in the scene with Charles and Raven is, well, they're kids. But the dialogue is really ABC Family. I understand that they were trying to juxtapose with Erik's turmoil, but they really didn't have to make it so on the nose. Erik life bad, Charles life better, we get it. The setting tells us that more than anything since Charles is in a mansion and Erik is in a freaking concentration camp. I also have to levy some criticism on the scene where Erik's mother is killed by who we learn to be Sebastian Shaw. And Erik kills everyone in the room but him. There's this whole big scene where Erik is moving everything in the room but isn't throwing anything at Shaw. I get maybe they wanted to reveal his powers later, but it really kills the scene because you'd think that the one person Erik wanted to kill would be the one person that killed his mother. There was a scene where Moira brings in Charles, a civilian, seemingly without approval. To be fair, maybe she didn't need it, but I don't know, seems kind of odd. After the whole conflict on the beach, Moira and the remaining mutants are left there with a wrecked submarine and a destroyed X-Jet. So, how'd they get off the island? Did Erik send Azazel back to get them? Were they picked up by the military? If so, which one? I don't know. Seems kind of odd. There's a character, Darwin, that could adapt to anything, but he couldn't adapt to Shaw's power marshmallow. Why? Maybe it just overloaded his power? Don't know. Seems kind of odd. And I have to go in a bit on Darwin here, mainly because of the setting this movie takes place in, which is pre-civil rights. And you have a black man that can literally adapt to survive. Feels like a hell of a missed story opportunity there, but I guess they just chose to kill him off. However, I would be remiss if I didn't state the crime of messing up the character of Emma Frost. I mean, this is the Emma Frost, the White Queen. This character was nothing to F with in the comics, and in this movie, she pretty much has the personality of a stump. I mean, don't get me wrong, January Jones does look the part, but she just seems so bored. I don't know if it was just her, they told her to be that way, but it was just really sad.
Pathetic.
All in all, you have a flawed film, but it's still able to rank really high in the list of comic book movies. It's a good character-driven story with some fun action sprinkled in, and some noteworthy performances that the franchise desperately needed. So pop this one in if you need it to be reminded of what a good X-Men movie feels like, because after the sequel to this movie, we're gonna be in for a ride. A sad, painful ride.
Everything they've built will fall!